Hello, Habit Mechanics. I hope everyone's having a fantastic week. My name's Dr. Jon Finn. Welcome back to the Habit Mechanic podcast. We're live streaming in the Habit Mechanic University app. And I'm really excited about today because we're going to talk about chapter 4 of the Habit Mechanic. And for me, what I've really enjoyed about this chapter is people's feedback, actually. It's one of the first things they feedback about, the idea that hooked them into the book and really got them thinking about how effective or not the current ways they were using to be their best were. So I'm excited about that. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Andrew Whitelam. Andrew, how are you?
Yeah, hi there, John. Yeah, I'm great, thank you. I'm doing well. Hope you are too. And yeah, chapter 4 for me too is a really exciting chapter. Gets the juices flowing because it tells a fantastic, fascinating sporting story, a story of sporting accomplishment that's certainly very well known in Britain and pretty well known across the world as well. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but it really is a story of amazing athletic achievement and really drills down into the nuts and bolts of how and why it happened. So I look forward to talking about that in just a few moments. And also on the podcast, we're going to be talking about something that's in the news in the last 10 days, certainly in the UK. The NHS is reportedly going to be rolling out a new weight loss jab, an injection to lose weight. According to quite a few media reports and well-sourced media reports, it looks like it's on the way. So there are a lot of things to talk about there for us, John, and I'm looking forward to discussing the ins and outs of the weight loss jab with you. I will also be hearing a question at the end from people who've submitted questions to you, and keep the questions coming in via the website tougherminds.co.uk, and we will tackle those in every podcast. So yeah, it's going to be a good one for sure. Yeah, I think, John, let's dive right in. Chapter 4 in the Habit Mechanic book tells the story of a name that will perhaps be well recognized by a lot of people. Sir Roger Bannister, the man who broke the 4-minute mile record. This was a major milestone, if you'll pardon the pun, in sport and athletics in the 1950s. And yeah, Roger Bannister was the man to break the record. And you've used this achievement, John, and really explored the story of it to draw a fascinating parallel and take some great lessons from it. If you tell us more, please.
Yeah, so obviously you can read the story in chapter 4. I distinctly remember how I came about this. I'd heard Bannister talk about his belief in the physiology. So he said he knew that physiologically it was possible to run a sub 4-minute mile. And I was walking, I distinctly remember it. I was walking to my office one day through the park. And I remember just popped into my head, wouldn't it be great if Roger Bannister had actually done? I knew he was trying to be a medical doctor, which is where some of the confidence came from for the fact that human physiology he felt was capable of doing the sub 4-minute mile, of achieving the sub 4-minute mile. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if actually he'd done some research, if he was looking at that? And when I started, so I just thought, well, I'll Google that and see what comes up. And it turned out he was actually not only training to be a medical doctor at Oxford when he ran the sub 4-minute mile, he was also a research scholar at Oxford, and he was in the laboratories doing research on the role of oxygen in running. So I thought, wow, this is fascinating, and I actually got hold of a copy of Neil Biscombe's book called, I think, is it The Perfect Mile? I quote it in The Perfect Mile, Neil Bascombe's book, The Perfect Mile, where he, goes into mega detail across about 600 pages into how Bannister managed to be the first person in the world to achieve this record result. And what I found fascinating, what impact his training was actually physically having on his body, and how his body was able to adapt and to refine and to become more efficient at running the mile. and also how he was using those insights to inform the way that he then trained, and actually the way that he ran, even his running style, he was being informed by insights he was getting from, in simple terms, what he was learning about what was going on in his body. Coupled with that, there were two other prominent athletes who were trying to break that record at the same time. An American called Wes Santee and an Australian called John Landy. They were all going for it. It was like a 3-horse race, if you like. The other two athletes were not doing the physiology work. They were not looking at their physiology in the same way Bannister was. So they were just looking at how fast did I run in training? Let me tweak my training style based on I don't know what, based on some insight that their trainer had about how to run faster, based on their experience, but not based on actually what was going on inside the body. So for me, that was the hook, and that's what brought me to write this chapter.
Yeah, and Roger Bannister, it's probably worth setting the context. You talked about him being a medical student and a research scholar at Oxford. This is in the 50s, remember. This is not the days of professional athletes. He was a Corinthian amateur, as they would call it. You know, he just did his running on the side, and most elite sports people did that, whatever sport it was, perhaps not professional football at the time, but a lot of people, especially in athletics, would be doing other things. So Roger Bannister, I suppose, was fortunate to be studying the human body and physiology, but yeah, he had two careers, if you like, a professional athlete or a full-time elite athlete, and a medical student and a research scholar. It's fascinating that put him in the position to do that. And in the Habit Mechanic book, John, you've just talked about it then with the two competitors of Roger Bannister, and I presume we can assume that these two rivals, if you like, were known to Bannister, and he was perhaps feeling under pressure to be the first to run a sub 4-minute mile, even though it wasn't the internet age, and that he perhaps had to wait for telegrams and newspapers to be published. But I'm sure the book will go into that detail, the Neil Bascom book. But you point out how Bannister used this approach, very distinct from the other two, and you would describe the approach the other two rivals took as a black box approach, not looking in detail at the inputs and measuring those kind of things. Please do tell us more about that, because I think that's so important for people to understand the distinction.
Yeah, and it's a term people are not familiar with in this context. I think we think of a black box as something you get in an aeroplane that records what goes on. But actually, this term, in the way I'm using it, I first came across when I was studying my master's, and some academics that were doing research in the university I was working in, they'd published a few papers talking about black box theories. And essentially, black box theory is a theory that's created when the scientists don't actually know what is going on inside of the phenomena they're looking at. So in simple terms, if you have a cup of coffee, which is, think of that as the input, the output is you feel more alert, you feel it's easier to concentrate. But actually, if you were looking at that through a black box lens, you wouldn't understand what happened in your brain to make you feel more focused and more alert. Another example, you might get some negative feedback from your boss. That's an input. The output is that you don't feel very good, you worry, you beat yourself up. But you don't actually know what went on inside your brain to make you feel like that. So the black box approach in scientific terms is describing research, methodologies, practices that have been developed without actually understanding what goes on inside, in our case, the brain, but in the case of the Roger Bannister story, and for Wes Santee and John Landy, his rivals, they were using a black box approach to their training. They were training, and then they were getting an output. The output may have been meant they were running faster, but they didn't know what was going on inside their body to help them to get those results. So therefore, they had less information to help them to refine and tweak and advance their training further. Whereas Bannister was actually training, but then analysing what was going on inside his body. And therefore, the results of his training were far more meaningful, and he had a far better understanding of what he needed to tweak and refine. In the habit mechanic approach, and this sounds absolutely bizarre to say it, but it's real. When you go to a coach, you go to a psychologist, you go to a therapist, you go to a counselor, all these people that are experts, obviously on a continuum, some are more expert than others. They're the people that you go to help you to think more effectively in simple terms. It might be to help you to supercharge your stress management or your motivation or your productivity or your confidence, or to become a better leader, etc. The advice they are giving you 99.9% of the time is based on black box theories, because most of their training and the theories they learned were created before we actually understood how brains worked. And the point, I think it's the 1950s when Bannister breaks this record. I think that the technologies Bannister was using to analyze what I call gas exchange and physiological peripheral indices, things like heart rate, etc. We were able to take those measurements from human beings, I think from about the 1930s, and that kind of research was ramped up into World War II. So we had this ability since about the 1930s to really look in quite a lot of detail at human physiology. We've only been able to look inside the human brain in real time, so in a meaningful way, for about 20, 25 years. And we've spent, that the human brain is the most complex thing in the known universe. So you don't just look inside it and go, oh yeah, that's obvious how it all works, etc. We've had to make sense of that. So the vast majority of advice we're being given before the habit mechanic approach to help us to do better is based on black box theories. That means that it's never going to be anywhere near as powerful and as insightful as it can be. And it means that sometimes it's just going to get things wrong. One of the really simple ideas there is that certainly when I went to school, it was by the top experts in the world. They believed that when you stopped physically growing, that your brain stopped changing in any important way. So that basically when you stopped physically growing, what you had neurobiologically, your talents, you want to use that word, your skills, your abilities, your character traits were absolutely fixed and set. We now know that's nonsense, and our brain is changing all the time via a process called neuroplasticity. And in fact, that brains in males are not fully mature until we're about 25 years old. That means that the powerful prefrontal cortex sites where our willpower lives is not actually fully wired in men until we're about 25, the females about 24. So, some of these things that we used to believe about the brain were just fundamentally flawed. But some of these ideas, they still persist, so things like psychometrics are still widely used, even though we know that they're flawed, and I would argue that they do more damage than good. Theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But all the black box theories, and they're the dominant theories, they're 99.9% of the theories that people are using every day to inform their practice. And that's also why when we go to experts, they believe that if they can get you to know what to do differently and maybe give you a few skills, that's going to help you to change your behavior. But brains don't run on knowing, they run on habits. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way you've drawn that parallel in the book and today for us on the podcast, between advancements in the understanding of physiology and advancements in the understanding of the brain, and how those insights are used in the habit mechanic university, and something else we're going to talk about in a few moments, it is so helpful and so beneficial, and it really is a true light bulb moment. And I would encourage people to look at chapter 4. Now, Jon, there is the good news here, because people can access this expertise, this understanding. You're helping a number of people to not only understand it but deliver it for others with the Certified Habit Mechanic Coach program, which you launched recently and are delivering successfully now to growing numbers of people. Please tell us about that and how people can benefit from that.
Yeah, so that's really exciting work that I'm doing at the moment. I'm working with a range of people to help them to become certified habit mechanic coaches. I think that what I would now call habit science, which is a combination of neuroscience, behavioral science, applied performance psychology, I think that habit science can do for well-being and human performance, team performance, individually and collectively, what sports science did for the physical conditioning of professional athletes in the last 20 years. So these people that are training to become certified habit mechanic coaches are on the absolute cutting edge front wave of that. And I'm already seeing some of these people work in quite big organizations. I'm already seeing the positive benefits. And those people can see, I think, quite clearly the difference between what they have previously been doing to help people to be their best. They went to the experts. They said, what do we need to do to make this happen? But they're seeing the difference between what they were told and trained they needed to do to help people to be their best, and the habit mechanic approach. So that's really exciting. So a really powerful part of the Certified Habit Mechanic coaching program is, one, I get to work with all these people one-to-one. I won't be doing this forever, but right now that's what I'm doing. So I'm working with people over about 3 to 6 months. We work together for about 10 hours over 6 core sessions. But people get the books for their clients or their teams. They get access to the full version of the app for their people, for their teams. And they're already using these tools to help others to do better. So immediately they're able to start using the 30 plus habit mechanic tools, and also what we call the habit metric assessments with their clients, with their teams. And already we're seeing the benefits of that. Yeah, so that's really exciting. So, it's one thing, and this is why I suppose the habit mechanic approach and the habit mechanic book is different on the app, is that, there's a chapter in there about Roger Bannister and how he was using a new approach that wasn't a black box approach. Many books that I read would just then repeat that idea maybe 10 times across 10 different chapters, maybe using 10 different case studies. But what the habit mechanic approach is about is giving you the toolkit then to make that a reality in your own life, your clients' lives, your team's lives, etc. So that's really exciting. If anyone wants to become a certified habit mechanic coach, do get in touch and let's have a conversation. It's a selective process. We've not been able to work with everybody who's wanted to do it, but I'm happy to have a conversation with everyone, because if it's not the right time for you right now, or you don't have the skill set right now to be able to do it, then maybe it's something you could do in the future. So if you're interested, do reach out and let's have a conversation.
And just to restate then, Jon, I think you mentioned it, the Certified Habit Mechanic Coach. This is for people who perhaps are coaches already or wanting to establish themselves as coaches, which is, of course, a growing part of society, but also for people in organizations and businesses too. This is something that will work for both those sectors, as it were.
Yeah, so we're working across a continuum of with the military, within elite sport, within high higher education, elite higher education. We're working with global businesses, so training people in the businesses. And then we're working with smaller businesses, so business owners who want to learn how to embed this into their business culture. And then people who are coaches, who've got their own coaching business coaches, might be, very a particular profession, and they're now passionate about helping others to get good at what they were good at. Could be they were good at sales, for example, but they understand that actually to help other people, it's not just about giving them more knowledge and skills. They need to help them to build better habits. So yeah, it's across an entire range. So, and also some schools are starting to sign up to do this as well, to train some of their staff to become certified habit mechanic coaches. With Tougher Minds, we established our program, first of all, in elite sport, then we went into education and then into business. So we have the case studies and the toolkit, the specific language. We know how to apply this in a nuanced way across all those areas. So yeah, ultimately our mission is to make it as easy as possible for people to be at their best. So anyone that wants to become a certified habit coach, yeah, we're happy to explore working with you.
And people can contact you via tougherminds.co.uk, just to confirm, Jon, if they are interested in the certified habit mechanic coach program.
Absolutely, yeah. Just drop us a line and we'll come back to you and schedule a call.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great example of the insights made real and made accessible to people. Let's just finish off the Roger Bannister story, if you like, then. We've been talking about how he succeeded in breaking the 4-minute mile record in the 1950s, an iconic sporting achievement at the time, and subsequently it's been immortalized, really, because Roger Bannister didn't use this black box approach. He did seek to specifically measure the effects of what he was doing physiologically, in the same way that the habit mechanic benefits from measuring the measurement and the insight that we've gained into what happens specifically in the brain, and hence all the insight that brings. And I suppose the final thing to say then, Jon, is that with this insight and with your work, you've developed a two-step process then, based on this non-black box, this scientific understanding for people to use to be their best, to perform better, to feel better in their lives and in their work. You talk about it in the book. Understand how the brain works. You say that this is the approach we'll take you on, the journey we'll take people on as habit mechanics, is to understand how their brain works, and then and understand the role of habits then, of course, as a pivotal, inextricable part of that. And then the second part, to start building new helpful habits.
Yeah, that's the starting point to becoming a habit mechanic. Roger Bannister, for me, is a habit mechanic. He took a deep dive into how his body worked and got the benefits from that, was able to build better running habits, essentially, is what he was doing, training habits and performance habits. Whether we want to improve our sleep, our diet, our exercise, improve our ability to manage stress, to build our confidence, to perform under pressure, to become more focused, productive, to get better work-life balance, whether we want to become a better role model, a better communicator, we want to become what I call a better cultural architect, we want to become a better coach, so we can actually help people to not just know what is a good idea for them to do, but help them to build better habits. The first step is to learn how our brain actually works. So we've got a better sense of what's driving us, of these, the brain is sometimes described, it's like you've got 1 trillion cogs in your head just whirling around mindlessly. And that's what the first section of the book helps you to do, is to understand how your brain works. And then it's about understanding about how to identify the habits it would be more helpful for you to build, identifying the destructive habits that are stopping you being at your best, and then having simple, practical ways to build and sustain new helpful habits. So yeah, it's a two-step process at a very high level. And I think the great thing about the book is that, the book, we didn't just sit down and think, oh, we're going to write a book, so let's just start on a blank piece of paper and write down, as much as we can and see where we get. This book is essentially a summary of all the training we've been developing and running with over 10,000 people over the past 20 years. So all these ideas in the book, the toolkit, is tried and tested. However, when you put it into a book format, there's no guarantee that it's going to translate, that you can translate a presentation, if you like, that you did in a room with people, or a program of work you did in a room with people, or coaching sessions that you do with people. There's no guarantee that will translate into a book. And that's why I'm delighted with the feedback that I see, whether it's on Amazon or even in the app and other places people leave reviews, they reach out on LinkedIn, etc., just telling us what a positive impact the book is having on their lives. So it's great that this is translated. And I think people that are getting the most benefits are actually coupling the book and the app, which are designed to be used together. And we can see that on a daily basis, people reporting in the app the work they're doing on themselves, that what we call personal research, in order to learn more about themselves and develop their habit mechanic intelligence, and the results they're getting as a consequence for that. And not only for themselves, they're actually able to help others as well. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and in the app as well. Of course, I think if people can see there on screen, there it's downloadable for free from the App Store and Google Play. A wealth of opportunity and resources in there, and also the chance to access the free audiobook version of the Habit Mechanic. And we'll come on to that later and talk about how specifically there are so many tools and so many opportunities to learn in that free audio book about specific challenges you might be facing, but worth pointing that out at this stage as well. It's free to download. Just finally then, Jon, on this the chapter 4 section of the podcast, as I say, we're going to go on to talk about some news we've had on the health front in the UK, but the fact that I think for me, the fact that you set out, as you say, it's far more to it than that, but you set out a 2-step process. That's part of the habit mechanic approach for me. The clarity, the simplicity in terms of setting out for people how to start and how to approach this. The accessibility you offer is something that's so beneficial. Why is that important, I suppose, is the question. And I think you've said already, it's been something that people have really taken to and found beneficial for them.
I think understanding how your brain actually works is really empowering, but it's moving beyond, knowing about what different areas of the brain are called, etc. Moving beyond what some research papers might say about how your brain works, but understanding it in a really user-friendly way. Our life is dominated by stories, and often the story we've been told about ourselves, how we think, why we think in that way, our ability or inability often to change, those stories are very limiting, and they add towards many of the stresses, strains, and challenges people are experiencing in their day-to-day lives. So actually understanding how your brain works and being able to articulate that to yourself in a simple story, whether it's willpower versus Hugh or the lighthouse brain model, or you can go into a bit more detail with the 8 brain if you want, that's really empowering for people, so that they've actually got a much better sense of what is going on inside, in between their ears, and that they are able to start making positive changes, and they can couple resisting that old urge to do the unhelpful thing, whether that's beating yourself up too much or getting distracted or eating the wrong type of food or communicating poorly to a colleague or staying up and watching the next episode on Netflix instead of getting to bed on time, that they can resist that. And also they can use the 9 action factors model to make it easier for them to start making longer lasting, sustainable changes. So I think that it's much easier for us that we live. So I suppose professionally, I've operated in a space, in an industry, if you like, that's full of, I think the Americans would say, woo woo, which means like, not sort of a bit of nonsense, basically. It's a bit of mumbo jumbo. And I think for a long time, because psychology has been so intangible and it has been based on these black box theories, that it has felt really intangible. Even if you wanted to go there, the information that was out there wasn't that robust. And when we actually bring brain science into it, and we couple that with habit science, and really start to understand that most of what we're doing most of the time is just mindless, subconscious, unconscious thinking and doing, but that we can start to proactively direct, manage, and in simple terms, reprogram our habits for the better. That's really exciting for people, because we do want to. I think the driving, the driver for most people is they do want to feel better. They do want to do better. They do want to look better in front of important people in their lives, and learning that we have far more control over what we think and do than we've previously had before. And actually the stuff we might have tried before wasn't actually based on great science, and that's why we might not have been able to have made the positive change we would have liked. It's exciting. And then people very quickly, from chapter 1, for example, in the habit mechanic, they complete that T plan and they get a little bit of progress, a little bit of momentum, and then that drives you on to the next thing. So yeah, I think a combination of all those reasons is why people understanding how their brain works and then having some simple practical things to do to start making change is so important.
Well, thank you for that, Jon, and thank you for taking us through chapter 4 in that detail and that depth, and drilling down into some of the stories that you tell there. And let's hope everyone can experience the type of success with feeling better and doing better that Roger Bannister experienced in his athletic endeavours. That would be hopefully a record-breaking achievement if it could happen in great numbers. We're going to go on then to talk about some fairly major health news and some well-being news that broke in the UK in the last 10 days or so, and the implications and the issues around that. But before we go on to that, Johnny, I know you've been out and about with your work and training people. One of your recent stops was at St George's Park, the home of the English Football Association. I understand you gave one of the first Tougher Minds talks to an audience there. That keynote service you offer now is in full swing. Just tell us a little bit more about that briefly. And I'd like to ask you about how people can really benefit from the keynotes. But again, that's something you've just started recently.
Yeah, so we've reactivated our what we call Tougher Minds talks. Obviously, the world was turned on its head over the last 3 years or so, and it's great to get out there again and look into people's eyes in real time. But we've redesigned the Tougher Minds talks with the goal to make that hour, 90 minutes, however long it is, have the best possible chance of actually helping people to start building new helpful habits. And that's why we don't just give an engaging, interactive talk that really gets people understanding more about themselves and their colleagues and their teams, but also we couple it with the book and the app, and we give people the resources and the tools that they can carry on using in their day-to-day life, so that they can not just leave the room with a few nice ideas, but they can start to put into practice some of the things they've learned straight away, and they've got a way of building a new habit. And I know people are in the app, for example, from that talk, and I see them every day. They're not just, they didn't just know something differently at the end. They're actually putting it into practice, and I can see the progress that they're making a couple of weeks after that talk. So that's what we set out to to design, and clearly people are recognizing that, because there's been a huge demand for those talks, since we released them, I think just the other day.
Yeah, okay. Well, if we can just spend a few moments then talking a little bit more about them. As you say, great to be out and about after that very, very bleak period for many people, and mixing with people. One of the first things that people take away then from a Tougher Minds talk is feeling happier, more focused, and with an ability to working towards fulfilling their potential. Tell us a bit more about that, Jon.
Yeah, I think again it helps people to understand how their brain actually works, the fact that brains are driving organizations and teams and the individuals in the organizations, but that brains run on habits. So one of the things we do in the keynote is we show people how to analyze their habits using our habit metrics, and straight away that gives you a better understanding of yourself, but also you've got the toolkit then to start working on any area that you want to work on. So whether it's sleep diet and exercise, managing stress, building confidence, performing under pressure, being more focused, productive, managing your work-life balance better, being a better leader, being a better team member. So you could use our 5-stage team power model, use our action communicator tools, our role model tools, use our SWOT coach tools, use our cultural architect tools. So straight away, we're getting people not just knowing some more stuff, but analyzing themselves in a tried and tested way, and then showing them which tools they can begin using. So yeah, it's as immediate benefits as you're going to get from this type of approach.
And these tools will enable people, as I understand it, then to start improving things in their lives, have more control over their lives, improving all sorts of things like well-being, how they feel about themselves, their performance, perhaps under pressure, and their leadership skills too. And critically, I think, Jon, you guiding people to start identifying the habits that are unhelpful or destructive habits, as you call them, and their helpful habits, or the super habits, as you name them.
Yeah, so we've got habits wrong. Pop psychology's done a bad job on it. Habits are not just 60%, 50% of what we do. They're at least 98% of what we're thinking and doing right now, and sometimes it's up to 100%. And we often only think of habits as good habits. So we only frame something as a habit when it's positive. Oh yeah, I've got a great habit around that, or I need to build better habits. Most of what you're doing most of the time is a habit. So all the unhelpful stuff that you do is habitualized, in the same way the helpful stuff is. And what I've learned over the past 20 years is that some habits are more impactful than others. So I call the negative the negative habits that are more impactful destructive habits. That might be, for example, a destructive habit for me. This is just an example. This would have been true for me actually, but it's not anymore. But a destructive habit for me is I finish work too late, and because I finish work too late, I'm really hungry, so I eat too much. And because I eat too much, I don't sleep very well. You could couple then as well, because I finish work too late, I'm very stressed. I have a glass of wine as well. I don't sleep very well. I don't sleep very well. I don't feel very productive the next day. I have brain fog, etc. Then I'm very inefficient the next day, and then I end up finishing work late again, and then I end up eating too much again. And now I'm starting to gain weight, and now I don't feel very good about my body image. And it goes on like that, just by doing that one thing, finishing work too late. On the other end of the habit continuum, you can have super habits. So super habits are disproportionately positive in their impact on your day-to-day life. So for many people, creating a daily tea plan is becoming a super habit, because they spend 10 minutes in the app or in their own notebooks writing out this very simple 3-step tea plan process. And it leads to the triggering of lots of other helpful behaviors throughout the course of the day. I'm more focused, I'm more productive. I finish work on time. I get to spend more time with my family. I get a better night's sleep. I'm my health is better, I feel better the next day, and it goes on like that. So yeah, destructive habits, super habits, the habit metrics that we get people using in the keynotes is the start to that journey.
Yeah, and it's again worth pointing out, as well as the insight you share, part of a Tougher Minds talk, your keynote service, everyone taking part, everyone attending receives a copy of The Habit Mechanic, which is a bestseller now, and premium level access to the new Habit Mechanic University app, which, as you say, is this tool to start the journey with.
Yes. So you don't just leave the room with a few notes and a few ideas. You get the manual and the toolkit, not just as a static book, but that's really important as well if you don't want to be online, but also you get the coach in your pocket, the Habit Mechanic University app, which is a faster, more reliable way to be at your best. And you start to create that language across the team, across the organization, that shared, powerful language, a language about ourselves. When we covered this in the last podcast, didn't we? But we're going to have it was interesting. Yeah, there was a big political pact announced yesterday between the UK, Australia, the US about naval working together. The Navy's working together, and actually, one of the UK Prime Minister's points was they're going to use the same language. And I thought that was really interesting, that they're going to standardise some of the language that they use across those navies. But isn't it bizarre, for example, that if I work at a law firm, that we have all this very precise language that we use about law, but when it comes to ourselves, the people that are driving the law and driving the work, we don't have a very precise language about ourselves, about the ways that we think and the ways that we do things. And that's what the Habit Mechanic does. So we get this shared language around well-being and performance and leadership and high-performing cultures. So yeah, the keynotes really are packing a big punch. And if people are interested, just get in touch. We only have limited slots available, but get in touch, register your interest, and we might be able to squeeze you in.
Yeah, and there's a Tougher Minds Talks, a keynote page on the Tougher Minds website, tougherminds.co.uk. You will see keynote in the top menu, so people can find out more information and start that process of contacting you, as you say, Jon, right there. Well, something else that was in the news, not yesterday, with, as you say, the news of the new defence pact between Australia, the US and the UK. But prior to that was news of a weight loss jab. One article in the Daily Telegraph talked about the NHS rolling out a new weight loss jab, which, as it described it, could suppress your appetite and then hence bring about weight loss. And it was described in the Telegraph as part of a productivity drive to improve people's productivity, self-evidently, but also to do things like perhaps reduce the burden on the state when it comes to disability benefits, that kind of thing. Nothing massively official that I've seen, certainly out and about, but certainly loads of coverage of this weight loss jab in terms of its development by the pharmaceutical industry and its purpose. If it is a productivity drive, that's something, Jon, you know a lot about. What do you make of it? What's your initial reaction to this news?
Yeah, I think that we need to be careful not to get carried away about the impact that an appetite suppressant or suppressor is going to have. So not feeling as hungry as you might otherwise feel is probably going to mean you're going to eat less. And that's as far as we can sort of make claims about what it's going to do. If you eat less, you might lose weight. It depends. Maybe previously you were exercising quite a bit, but also eating quite a lot. But then maybe you eat less, but then you stop exercising. We know that effect already with things like smartwatches and smartphones. And I can't think of the actual name of the effect, but it's been observed quite a few times, where essentially you overestimate the calorie burn of your exercise, because now you can see it on your wrist, and therefore you end up eating more calories than you're burning. So you think, well, I walked to the office and I burned 250 calories. Fantastic. I can now have a double chocolate chip donut without recognizing that there are nearly 700 calories in the chocolate chip donut that you've just had.
Is it the licensing effect, John? I think you warned me about it once when I said to you that I'd walked up from the station so I could have one of those donuts that you described.
Yeah, so it's a licensing effect I do write about in chapter 18. So yeah, so we have to be aware. So if it suppresses appetite, that's what you're going to eat less. But I think where we often get lost with diet or we're misdirected is that we're always thinking about diet in relation to body image. How fat or thin are you? But for me, the first thing to think about with diet is brain function. This thing that we've spoken about a lot in this episode, and we'll continue to do so in others, but your brain is encased inside your skull. You can't see it. We're not all that aware of it, but it's there and it's driving everything that we're doing. And we now know, for example, that a lot of the processed foods that we have access to, and even what we call them micro-processed foods, they can't even get into your brain. They can't pass what we call the blood-brain barrier, because our body doesn't know what these new things are that we're putting into our body. We've been around for over 300,000 years, and our body is designed to eat natural food, essentially. So I think we need to think about brain health first and foremost when we're thinking about what are we putting into our mouths. Is it going to actually help your brain to work better?
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting perspective on it, John, which I'm sure a tiny minority of people, I think we're fairly safe to say, that would have considered. It's certainly something I never considered before I started working with you. Food as fuel for your brain, not just your body, and arguably that's the first thing you should think about. I think it's pretty clear. You make that excellent point then that reducing your appetite might have this disadvantageous side effect then of limiting your intake of beneficial foods. I think that's what the broader point is, and it's something worth considering. But again, just going back to the broader coverage of this weight loss jab, this so-called weight loss jab, if it is about improving productivity and making people or helping people to improve themselves, I guess you would say then that yes, okay, you can have a jab if you want. It might be part of a whole suite of measures you take or actions you take, but what the habit mechanic does is lay out a pathway for people to embark on and start making positive changes without having to take new medicines and new substances. And of course, nobody's saying that medical advancement should be dismissed, and it's important to consider. But people can just start this in their own right by using the simple and practical tools in the habit mechanic.
Yeah, so I would, if you want to start working on better diet and also sleep and exercise, that for me they're all coupled together, and they are doing those three things well is the foundation of good brain health. I'd start with chapter 19 in the book. You can listen to that for free, absolutely free, in the Habit Mechanic University app. Chapter 19. In chapter 19, we really take a deep dive into the knowledge and the skills around why do we need to eat well? How do different foods impact brain function? We do the same for sleep. We do the same for exercise. We then talk about some simple practical skills you can use to improve all those three areas. But then we introduce what we call the DES swap tool. So DES is our acronym for diet, exercise, and sleep. SWAP stands for self-watch, aim, plan. It's our most basic change cycle. So we have a tool that's in the book. You can listen to it for free on the audiobook in the app if you want. If you don't have the book, or you can obviously get a copy of the book. And it shows you how to start doing. But the key super habits for all of us are more intelligent self-watching and more intelligent planning. And all the 30 plus tools in the book are all about more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning. They make it easy for you to do those things. So if we're actually going to help more people in Britain to be healthier, happier, and at their best, the core driver of that is empowering those people to do more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning, and to develop what I would call their habit mechanic intelligence. Having a jab might be a tiny part of their success story if we want to help people to actually become healthier, happier, and at their best more often. So yeah, you can start to do more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning around your sleep, your diet, your exercise by starting with chapter 19. But you can do exactly the same thing for your stress management, for your confidence, for your productivity, focus, work-life balance, for performing under pressure, for your leadership, so your communication skills, your ability to be a role model, your ability to coach and help others, your ability to be a cultural architect, your ability to build a great culture in a team or an organization. All those tools are in the book, because ultimately, if we're going to make successful change, we need to focus on building better habits. And again, it's better habits first and foremost around more intelligent self-watching and more intelligent planning. So that would be my advice to people that really want to make sustainable change. And it would be my advice to people that want to help others to make sustainable change. Medicine is very alluring because it's just swallow that thing and it's going to have this huge impact on your life. Sometimes we need the medicine to help us to get back on track, or to give us a bit of a supercharge in the beginning, but ultimately we get good at what we practice, and we practice what we're in the habit of doing. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling loop. So the holy grail really is to build better habits. And again, I'll repeat, for me, the key habits to build are around more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning.
Yeah, it's perhaps there will be a day when the NHS prescribes the habit mechanic for people, John, not a jab, but
well, let me say something to you. So someone has told me very recently they get access to the best mental health support the NHS offers, and they've told me that just reading the habit mechanic book was far more powerful than that support they're getting. So yeah, but look, we're not blaming anyone here. We haven't known this stuff before. I spoke to someone the other day. You know, they're asking me, they'd seen me a talk actually, presenting a keynote, and they were asking, you know, digging more into what I do. And they just said, I'm not surprised it's taken you over 20 years to put this together because it's so complicated. It's such a complex area, you know. So this isn't easy to do, but it is here now. The tools and the techniques are here. Everyone that's putting these into practice, they're getting benefits. And I do think that the more people we can help and support to become habit mechanics, the better the world will be. It'll be a better place ultimately, which might sound a little bit fluffy and grandiose, but I just think if you can help people to feel better and do better, then the world becomes better. And the good news is it doesn't even cost you any money to start the journey, because you just get the Habit Mechanic University app and you can start listening to the audiobook straight away, or start posting your tea plans or whatever. So yeah, more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think that's a very great anecdote to share, John, and I think it's just worth emphasising that whilst, yeah, massive complexity in the science and the understanding, getting started, as you say, is very straightforward with either the Habit Mechanic University or the Habit Mechanic book. I'd just like to take you back briefly, John, before we conclude this section of the podcast. We've just been talking, obviously, about, you made the excellent point that consider eating for your brain as well as your body, and brain health driven by diet. That's a critically important issue, as I said, again, not something I'd ever considered. And on the subject of press coverage, I think there was something in the Guardian newspaper today, another piece of research talking about how a Mediterranean diet can slow the effects or limit the effects of dementia. What do we know? And I know you do talk about this in the Habit Mechanic book in an accessible way. What do we know about the types of foods then we should be eating to optimize our brain health?
Yeah, so I like to think of it across three core areas. So the question is, what does our brain need in order to work well? The first thing that it needs is energy. So we know that our brain's number one operating rule is to conserve energy. We're designed for survival, but without energy, we're not going to be alive. So it's like if your car doesn't have any petrol in it, it can't go anywhere. So our brain needs energy, and its primary source of energy is glucose. Our brain uses a surprising amount of our glucose intake. I can't remember the exact figures. It might be 40 or 50% or even higher than that of glucose. So because it's working and whirling all the time, those trillion-ish cogs that are turning. So to cut to the chase, the best sort of fuel we can put into our bodies are complex carbohydrates, because they give a slow release of glucose into our brain. So I think we typically would think of things like whole wheat or brown bread, rice, pasta, but there are other sources that you can get complex carbs from as well, which you can see lists of those in chapter 19. So our brain needs energy. The second thing that it needs is building blocks, because our brain is changing all the time. So we're building new neurobiological connections. So as you're listening now, and as you know, maybe an idea that I repeated quite a few times a while ago was more intelligent self-watching, more intelligent planning. Those two words will start to form in your brain as neurons, neurobiological connections. So everything we know and can do is stored in our brain somehow via neurobiological connections. Also, our brain is pruning itself all the time. So neurons are dying. So, for example, when you were at primary school or elementary school, the chances are that you knew everybody's name in your class. Do you still know everyone's name in your class? I'd be surprised if you did. That means that the neurons that you developed for remembering and learning those names have died away. They've been pruned because you don't use them anymore. But essentially, we need to make sure that we're putting foods into our body that our brain can use as building blocks. And the core food sources that our brain uses as building blocks are omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. So our brain is a fatty organ. And typically in a Western diet, the fatty acid group that we don't get enough of is omega-3 fatty acids. Again, if you look in chapter 19, you can see a list of the different food sources that you can get omega-3 fatty acids from, a surprising range of food sources. And then third, so we've got energy, we've got building blocks. Third, we need to give our brain nutrition to allow it to cleanse and clean itself out. And we get that through antioxidants. So, you know, through the course of a day, we've got lots of hormones and neurotransmitters that are building up in our brain when we get these overwhelming amounts of stress responses, which many people are having to process because of the way the world currently is. So we need to give our brain the best chance of clearing those things out. Good deep sleep is really important there, but also getting enough antioxidants into the system, and getting antioxidants into the system in a form that you can use. So certainly my understanding is that things like supplements are not very powerful because your body's not very good at absorbing them. So it's about taking things in as whole foods. So, you know, instead of having, so vitamin C is an antioxidant many of us are familiar with. Instead of having a vitamin C supplement, eat an orange or eat something that's got vitamin C in it, because that's giving your body a better chance of absorbing it and that being moved up into your brain. So they're the three things I would think about in order to eat for brain health. Are you putting the right energy into your body? Are you putting building blocks into your body so your brain can use them? And are you putting antioxidants into your body in a form that your brain can use them? Much more detail on that in chapter 19 as well.
Yes, and again, just worth stating one more time, you can access chapter 19 and all the chapters as well as audio chapters. The full audio book of The Habit Mechanic is available in the Habit Mechanic University app, free to download from the App Store and Google Play. And in chapter 19, yes, that you talk in greater detail about foods for brain health and improving your diet, your exercise, and your sleep with a very accessible approach. So that's a great opportunity for people as well, John. Well, once again, John, absolutely fascinating to talk in depth about the Habit Mechanic book and drill down into one of its chapters and the issues and the stories that emerge from that. Look forward to talking to you again soon about the book. But just before we go, just remind us then, two things that you've been specifically working with a lot of people on at the moment: the certified habit mechanic coach, which is for individuals, perhaps coaches and people in businesses and organizations, and the new keynote you've been offering via Tougher Minds Talks. Just give us an overview of what they are and how people can get involved one more time.
Yeah, so if you want to learn how to use the Habit Mechanic toolkit, the Habit Mechanic habit metrics to help your clients or your team and people, your organization, you can train to become a certified habit mechanic coach. So I'm working with a select group of people to do that. You get the books, you get the resources, so you can start coaching and working with your people straight away. If you're interested in that, just get in touch. Also, we just launched our new range of Tougher Minds Talks, our keynotes essentially. And we've very deliberately created that so that it gives people the very best chance of building sustainable new habits, not just leaving the room with some more ideas that was interesting and engaging, but actually they've got things to put into practice. So, for example, the app and the book are part of those talks, and we get people using those, in the talk, so that they're already starting to work on themselves and build better habits. If you're interested in booking one of those for your organizations, just get in touch.
Yes, and people can contact you via the website tougherminds.co.uk. Well, John, once again, thanks for all that.
Did we have a question, Andrew?
We did. Sorry, John. Yes, of course. Yeah, I had my piece of paper covered up on my desk. Let me just do that. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, please do submit your questions to us and let us know if you want us to talk about anything specific. Again, the website is the place to do that, tougherminds.co.uk via the contact section. But we do have a question this week from an Azza, and this does touch then, I think, on the certified habit mechanic coach offer that you were just talking about. And this coach, this person, I'm sorry, I'm not sure they are a coach, but they ask, my team are having problems working across projects efficiently. My understanding is that they're generally feeling overwhelmed. How would you reply to Azza, John?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. It's something many people are struggling with. So if we're feeling overwhelmed, the first thing is that our brains are probably not working very well. So we have to go back to the good sleep, the good diet, the good exercise. The only people that can manage that are the team members. And actually just throwing ahead to March 21st, where we've got a free webinar which focuses on improving team performance using our 5-step blueprint. So we're going to share our 5-step team power model. The first step is what we call me power conditioning. So if you want to have a really effective, high-performing team, we need everyone on the team to deliberately be working towards being at their best. We know the first question in the T plan, for example, is how well did I do my best to be at my best? Because that's the starting point for feeling better, for doing better, for being at your best. So I'd be interested to see, how proactive team members are being and looking after themselves. And I think what I would also do if I was I would use the 5-stage team power model, and I would get the team to assess itself across the 5 areas. You can actually learn more about the 5-stage team power model in chapter 28 of the book. And there actually is a self-assessment in there that you could use, so that you can start educating and making it clear about what it takes to be a really good team member, and actually what it takes to be a really good team. And we start assessing ourselves across those 5 areas. And then we can keep coming back to those ideas periodically to see how we're progressing and we're developing. Because I think that most of the people in any team are hired because of their specific expertise in an area. But ultimately, when you join a team, it's because the organization wants to couple your expertise with other people's expertise. So we don't naturally understand what we need to do to be a fantastic team member. And I think that that's become much more difficult in the hybrid world. So it's really powerful to have that 5-step structure in the team power model, just to make everyone understand what we need them to do to contribute to the team as a collective. And also it gives you a simple way to measure. And then we have our what we call our team power model, then allows you to show people how they can start building different habits in different areas. So that will be a quick summary overview of my reflection on that, and I hope that answer is helpful.
Yeah, many thanks for that, Jon. Do please keep your questions coming in. I'll try to remember to bring them up at the end of the podcast. And no, in all seriousness, we will tackle your questions and share insights and point you to places within the habit mechanic that you can benefit from. So many thanks for that, Azza. Please do keep your questions coming in via tougherminds.co.uk. Well, Jon, again, thanks very much for your time this week. Great to talk to you. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, likewise, thank you to you, Andrew. Thank you for fantastic feedback people are giving us on the app. Remember, if you like the app, follow, give us a review, review any of the content that you're seeing if you like it and it's helping you. It's great to see those stories. So just thank you to the Habit Mechanic community for engaging and putting these things into practice and wanting to be at their best. I know that sometimes life can feel really challenging, but I think the key thing to always keep in mind is that you're only ever one habit away